It was a serene Sunday evening in Virginia, just 2 days before Ron Youngblood was set to relocate to Missouri with his daughter Brooklyn. Earlier that day, he had watched her walk away, hand in hand with her mother, Veronica. Everything seemed perfectly normal. There were no indications that anything was amiss. However, later that night, Ron's phone lit up with a voicemail from Veronica. It was brief, but the words she spoke would shatter his world. Initially, he struggled to comprehend the gravity of the message, but the truth would soon hit him, and it was far worse than he could have ever imagined. As Ron approached the end of his military career, he felt it was finally time to settle down and build a family. After years of missions, relocations, and the demanding lifestyle of a soldier, he longed for stability. In 2007, an assignment took him to Argentina, where he met Veronica, a charming woman with a young daughter named Sharon. Their family soon expanded with the birth of Brooklyn. When they were relocated to San Diego, Ron felt he had everything he had ever wanted: a loving wife, 2 daughters, and a home filled with warmth. However, just before a mission to Qatar in late 2013, cracks began to appear in their seemingly perfect life. One evening, Ron returned home to find Veronica drastically changed. Her long, light hair, something she had always taken pride in, was cut short and dyed dark. It wasn't just a new look, it felt like a transformation. When he inquired about the change, she brushed off his questions, offering no explanations, only distance. On the day of his deployment, Ron asked her to take him to the airport, but she refused. He kissed his daughters goodbye, feeling a sense of unease as he climbed into a taxi. That moment lingered in his mind, a hollow farewell that would haunt him during his 6-month deployment. Upon arriving in Qatar, Ron connected to the internet from his quarters, and messages began to appear on their shared family phone plan. However, some texts were not meant for him. One thread in particular caught his eye: romantic messages exchanged between Veronica and another man. She wrote about how much she loved kissing him and how she missed his touch. The intimacy was undeniable, and Ron felt utterly devastated. When he confronted Veronica, she did not deny the affair. Instead, she confessed that she was in love with the other man and planned to marry him, moving back to Argentina. Ron calmly told her that if she wanted a divorce, they could proceed, but he would not allow her to take Brooklyn away from him. Veronica responded with a chilling threat. "We're only 10 miles from the Mexican border. You really think I can't just cross and take a flight to Argentina?" That moment sent a shiver down Ron's spine. The next 5.5 months in Qatar were torturous. He felt helpless, paralyzed by distance, and haunted by the fear of losing his daughters. Then, unexpectedly, Veronica changed her tone. She expressed regret, saying she missed him and wanted to give their marriage another chance. Hoping to keep his family intact, Ron agreed to try again. An opportunity arose for him to transition from pilot to military attaché, and Veronica supported the move, leading them to Honduras. But within 2 months, history repeated itself. Ron discovered new messages revealing that Veronica was planning to move to Miami with another man. When he confronted her, she showed no remorse. All she wanted was to leave Honduras, taking Brooklyn and Sharon with her. At that moment, Ron realized that nothing had changed. The trust was gone, and there was no future left in their marriage. They agreed to divorce, but things took a darker turn when Ron received a call from the U.S. Embassy. They wanted to meet with him, and when he arrived, they asked that Veronica remain inside. Then came the shocking question: "How often do you hit your wife?" Ron was stunned. Veronica had gone to the Honduran authorities, accusing him of physical and emotional abuse toward her and the girls, claiming she feared for her life. Ron understood the weight of her words. In Honduras, diplomatic immunity did not apply in domestic violence cases. The embassy's legal team urged him to leave the country immediately, fearing a setup that could lead to him losing everything or even ending up in a Honduran prison. They fled without time to plan. Back in the U.S., Veronica and the girls stayed with her sister while Ron found a small apartment. But Veronica was not finished. She contacted his superiors, accusing him of neglect, claiming the girls had no food and slept on the floor. The consequences for Ron could have been catastrophic: a court-martial, loss of career, even jail time. He began to suspect that her motivations were financial. Shared custody meant less financial support for her. He knew the accusations were lies, but repeated lies can become weapons. He was forced to prove his innocence time and again. Looking back, Ron realized that Veronica would go to any lengths to get what she wanted, regardless of the damage left in her wake. She was relentless and unrepentant, and as painful as it was, he had no choice but to walk away from the woman who had once been his entire world. For Ron Youngblood, being doubted as a father, husband, or even a decent man was a crushing blow. He had always taken pride in those roles: provider, protector, parent. Every accusation made against him during the unraveling of his marriage was investigated. Ron's only goal was to defend himself, protect his relationship with his daughters, and avoid doing anything that could be twisted against him. He submitted receipts, answered questions, and followed every protocol. The authorities were satisfied, but deep down, Ron believed Veronica's true aim was not just to hurt him, it was to provoke him, hoping he would lash out and give her an advantage in the custody battle. She wanted control and used their daughters as tools to assert it. The woman Ron had met in Argentina was gone. In her place was someone manipulative and dishonest, someone who weaponized motherhood and fatherhood to gain power. At that point, Veronica had full custody of the girls and complete control over when or if Ron could see them. She exploited this to her advantage. Ron sought legal counsel and filed for divorce. His attorneys advised him to spend as much time as possible with the girls to show the court he wasn't abandoning them. One afternoon, Ron arrived at Veronica's house for a scheduled visit with Brooklyn, but Veronica opened the door and coldly told him she didn't want him to see her. Brooklyn stood just behind her, crying, wanting to see her father, but her mother said no. Ron was devastated. Veronica wasn't just denying him, she was using Brooklyn to assert dominance, smiling while doing it, fully aware of the pain she was causing. He left and returned the next day, and the day after that. Every day he was careful, so much was at stake, and he couldn't afford to react emotionally. She knew that and exploited it. Sharon, Veronica's older daughter, was in her first year of high school. She was bright, social, and adaptable, making friends easily no matter where they moved. For her 13th birthday, she chose to go camping with Ron instead of with her mom or friends. Veronica was upset by the decision, but for Ron, it meant everything. Sharon never saw him as a stepfather, and he never saw her as anything less than his daughter. They were best friends, biking together, running, and shopping for clothes. Sharon valued his opinion and confided in him about school, boys, and life. The only topic they never touched was what was happening between him and her mother. Life with Veronica had become increasingly erratic. Some days were tolerable, but others were pure chaos. If Ron forgot his wallet, Veronica would flush it down the toilet. She poured bleach on his clothes and submerged his laptop in the bathtub. These were provocations, Ron believed, attempts to make him react. He never did. She resumed her campaign against him, accusing him of physical and emotional abuse. Investigations followed, but again, there was no evidence. In fact, it was determined that Ron and Brooklyn were the ones suffering emotional harm. Even then, Ron couldn't understand where all the anger came from, but he knew he couldn't leave. Leaving meant abandoning the girls, and he couldn't do that. Then came the flood. One afternoon, while Ron was returning from work, Sharon called him in a panic. Water was pouring from the ceiling. He asked where her mother was. She was gone. He was still 20 to 30 minutes away, so he told Sharon to wait outside. He called Veronica, who told him a bizarre story. Brooklyn, then just 3 years old, had turned on both bathroom taps, plugged the drain, locked the door, and returned to bed. The story made no sense. Ron knew it wasn't true. When he got home, water had been running for nearly 10 hours and the house was destroyed. That incident was, in his mind, the clearest sign yet of how unstable Veronica had become. Soon after, their final divorce hearing took place. Custody only applied to Brooklyn, and the judge ruled for joint custody. Ron was required to provide the same standard of living Brooklyn had known while they were married. The court's decision seemed balanced until Veronica tried to overturn it. In July 2018, during a new hearing, Veronica was arrogant, believing that if she refused to comply, she wouldn't be forced to. She even taunted Ron, saying, "They won't let you take her from me." Ron feared she might be right. Losing Brooklyn was his greatest fear. But that day, the judge made it clear Veronica could choose to stay or go, but if Ron was relocating to Missouri, he had the right to take Brooklyn with him. Ideally, Ron would have taken both girls to avoid separating them, but Veronica refused to let Sharon go. For nearly 10 years, Sharon had been his daughter, and letting her go was excruciating. That hearing was the first time Veronica was held accountable when her words had to match her actions. She lost control, and Ron believed that was when she began crafting her next move. August 5th, 2018, just 2 days before Ron was scheduled to move to Missouri with Brooklyn, would shake everything once again. That night, Ron received a call from Veronica. She asked to see Brooklyn that day. Her tone was neutral, neither warm nor hostile. She mentioned she had gone to a gun show with a friend, something that didn't strike Ron as alarming. Veronica had mentioned guns before. It felt like idle conversation. While Brooklyn was getting ready, Veronica gave her daughter a kiss and a hug. Ron told Brooklyn he loved her, and his final memory of her is watching her walk down the sidewalk, hand in hand with her mother. That was the last time he saw her alive. In the middle of the night, Ron was awakened by the light of his phone. He had a voicemail from Veronica. The message was brief and chilling. She said she had shot Brooklyn and Sharon and that she was going to take her own life. She ended the message by saying she hated him. At first, Ron couldn't process it. He played the message again, sitting in disbelief. Then the phone rang. It was the Fairfax Police Department. Trembling, he asked how his daughters were. Brooklyn was dead and Sharon was still alive, but in surgery and not expected to make it. The voicemail would later be used as evidence. Veronica's voice was flat and detached, devoid of emotion. Ron knew immediately it wasn't a threat. It was real. When he arrived at the hospital, Sharon had survived her first operation. She was on a ventilator and unable to speak. Seeing her that way, broken and helpless, crushed Ron. The one person she should have trusted most had done this to her. He leaned close and told her he loved her, urging her to keep fighting and reassuring her that she wasn't alone. When she reached for his finger and squeezed it, he knew she understood. But the battle was only beginning. Sharon endured 4 more surgeries, each one taking more from her, until finally doctors told Ron there was nothing left to remove. The only thing keeping her alive was the machine. Ron had to make impossible decisions, stepping aside while someone else arranged Brooklyn's funeral because his focus had to be on Sharon. Then came the choice no parent should ever have to face: removing life support. Ron had to let his daughter go. Later, Veronica confessed that she shot Sharon first. When Sharon cried out in pain, she left the room and went into where Brooklyn slept, shooting her in the head. When she emerged and saw that Sharon was still alive, she shot her again. This was not a moment of madness. It had been planned for months, a calculated act of vengeance. She wanted to destroy Ron in the only way she knew how, by taking away the 2 people he loved most. Veronica wasn't sick. She was cruel, cold, and evil. After the killings, she even took photos of herself, her face blank and inhuman. She was no longer the woman Ron had once loved. Ron stated plainly, "Anyone who kills a child is a coward. If she wanted revenge, she should have taken my life. At least then, the girls would still be here." Veronica was eventually sentenced. The penalty could have been death, but Ron asked for life in prison. The girls were gone. Nothing would change that. But at least, he said, keeping her in this world was the only way he could still protect his daughters, ensuring she would never get near another child again. Ron has only a few things left of his girls, a photo of Sharon and a bracelet she made him, found after her death. He wears it always, saying, "Wherever I go, Sharon goes too." Brooklyn, his mini-me, was generous and kind, even at age 5. At her funeral, Ron had her fingerprints engraved into a ring he wears on his hand. It feels, he says, like holding hers. He keeps Brooklyn's ashes. She was never buried. Ron made a memorial in Missouri, a symbol of what was lost. When he dies, he wants their ashes, his and Brooklyn's, mixed together and buried alongside Sharon's bracelet. It's the only way he knows to stay close to them. He used to whisper to them during storms or when they were scared, "I've got you, I'll protect you." But the hardest truth any parent has to learn is this: no matter how much you love them, no matter how strong your promise is, you can't protect them from everything. Ron Young. Bloodwood's story is not just one of tragedy. It's a tale of a father's fierce love, unimaginable loss, and the haunting reality that even the strongest protector cannot shield their children from all harm. His journey serves as a reminder that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in uniform. They're fought within the walls of your own home against the very people you once trusted most. Yet Ron continues to fight, not with weapons, but with memory, truth, and love. Because even in loss, a father never stops being a father. Thank you for tuning in. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. A jungle that enticed them in, only to consume them whole. 2 young women vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of haunting clues and an unsettling silence. Was it the fury of nature, or something far more sinister lurking in the shadows? A decade later, the truth remains buried in silence, unseen, unanswered, and unwilling to be uncovered. April 1st began like any other sunlit morning in Boquete. Chris and Lisanne, both in their 20s and passionate about exploration, laced up their hiking boots and set off toward El Pinista, a trail renowned for its breathtaking views and eerie stillness. Some say they had brunch with 2 Dutchmen before their hike, while others recall them bringing along a friendly dog from a local restaurant. Nothing about that morning seemed amiss, not in the photos Lisanne captured on her Canon PowerShot camera. The images displayed smiles, mountain peaks, and sunlight streaming through the clouds. They appeared happy, at peace. The last normal photo, number 508, showed Chris carefully crossing a stream just after 1 p.m. And then, silence. The plan was straightforward. Lisanne Freun and Chris Kimmers, eager to explore Panama's wild beauty, had arranged to hike the trail with a local guide. But on the eve of their adventure, something unusual occurred. A day earlier than scheduled, the 2 young women made an unexpected decision. They set off alone into the jungle, without the guide and without anyone to watch over them. Why did they choose this path? The answer remains a mystery. The next morning, their guide arrived at the trailhead, expecting to meet the 2 tourists, but there was no sign of them, no footprints, no indication they had even begun the trail. A sense of unease began to settle in. It wasn't until the following day that the search commenced, but the clues didn't align with anyone's expectations. Against all logic, 2 hikers were found on the trail, yet Lisanne and Chris were already deep in the wilderness. How had they gotten there? The answer lay with an unlikely source, a local taxi driver who had dropped them off near the trailhead. To complicate matters, there were 2 other men in the vehicle. Who were they, and what role did they play in the women's strange journey? As the details unraveled, the story grew increasingly bizarre. The women, eager and excited to explore, had ventured into one of the jungle's most treacherous areas. Yet they had no map, no compass, and no flashlight. They were walking blind into the heart of the unknown, unprepared and unaware, soon to vanish from the world. As the jungle swallowed them whole, they didn't return. No sign of the girls, no messages, no movement. Concern spiraled into panic. Texts to Chris's father went unanswered. By April 6th, their desperate families were on Panamanian soil, joined by Dutch detectives, trained dogs, and a hefty reward of $30,000 for any trace of Chris and Lisanne. The jungle was swept, rivers combed, and air searched, but there was nothing. Not yet. Somewhere past the last smiling photograph, their story took a turn that no one anticipated. What truly happened after image number 508? What began as a hike through paradise quickly unraveled into a desperate fight for survival. Unbeknownst to early searchers, Chris and Lisanne had started calling for help just hours after they were last seen. Chris's iPhone attempted to reach emergency services, marking the first of what would become 77 failed attempts. Minutes later, Lisanne's Samsung followed suit. Both phones kept trying over the next several days, each call bouncing off the unforgiving silence of the jungle. There were no signals. Then came the photos, the strangest and most unsettling pieces of this tangled puzzle. From Lisanne's camera, investigators retrieved 133 images. Among them, 90 shots were taken in the dead of night on April 8th, almost all seemingly random, pitch-black jungle flashes against leaves, eerie close-ups of rocks, and inexplicable arrangements of a mirror, strips of plastic, and white tissues. One photo stands out like a ghost in the dark, the back of Chris's head, slightly slumped forward, taken at 1:49 a.m. Some claim to see blood near her temple, others weren't so sure. But the most disturbing clue was what was missing. Photo number 509. Was it deleted, corrupted, or did something far worse happen that we can never imagine? Whatever transpired in that jungle, it wasn't quick and it wasn't simple. The question now wasn't just how they died, but what or who was with them during those final harrowing days. It wasn't until June 14th, more than 10 weeks after Chris and Lisanne vanished into the rainforest, that the jungle finally yielded something. A local woman stumbled upon a blue backpack near the banks of the Culebra River, far off the main El Pianista Trail. Oddly, the bag was dry and clean, untouched by the relentless Panamanian rain. Even stranger, locals swore it hadn't been there the day before. Inside, authorities found both women's phones, $88 in cash, sunglasses, 2 bras, and Lisanne's camera, almost as if someone had carefully packed it and then left it behind on purpose. Nearby, Chris's denim shorts turned up, though whether they were folded neatly on a rock or tossed in disarray depends on who you ask. Then came the remains, a foot still inside a boot, a piece of pelvis, and bone fragments strewn along the river's edge. DNA confirmed the worst. It was them. But even in death, the mystery only deepened. Some of Lisanne's remains still had bits of skin, while Chris's bones appeared almost artificial, bleached white and unusually clean, with phosphorus levels that didn't match the environment. No signs of trauma, no cuts, no answers, just a heap of questions piling up as the investigation progressed. The questions only had silence as a response, a silence that grows louder with every unsettling clue. Who placed the backpack so carefully, and why? Why were the bones so drastically different? What truly happened deep in the jungle that April afternoon when 2 vibrant lives vanished without a sound? The investigation into the disappearance of Chris Commers and Lisanne Freund was anything but straightforward. In the months following their vanishing, Panamanian authorities shifted their theories multiple times. Initially, the case was classified as a possible homicide. Then the focus turned toward abduction, with rumors swirling and pressure mounting from both the media and the Dutch government. But by March 2015, nearly a year after the girls vanished, the case was quietly closed. Officials concluded that Chris and Lisanne had died as a result of a tragic hiking accident. According to the final report, the treacherous terrain, steep 30 to 40-meter cliffs and fast, unpredictable river currents, was to blame. The ruggedness of the jungle, they said, could easily explain why only scattered remains were found and why their discovery came weeks apart. Dutch forensic experts who had worked alongside Panamanian teams broadly agreed, emphasizing the dangerous conditions of the rainforest and the likelihood that the girls had gotten lost, injured, and ultimately succumbed to the elements. Their families, after months of agonizing uncertainty, accepted this explanation with heavy hearts. The bodies were flown home to the Netherlands, and Chris and Lisanne were finally laid to rest. In their memory, a small stone memorial was placed at the Mirador, the scenic viewpoint near the top of El Pianista, where their final smiling photos were taken. But even with the case closed, the public wasn't ready to move on. In fact, the official explanation only sparked more questions. Critics pointed out troubling inconsistencies, beginning with the mysterious appearance of the girl's backpack found along the Culebra River over 10 weeks later. It was strangely dry and clean despite the heavy Panamanian rains, and locals swore it hadn't been there the day before. And of course, there was photo number 509, the missing image from the camera's sequence. It didn't appear in the memory card structure, leading some to believe it had been deleted, possibly to hide something. Perhaps most haunting of all were the failed emergency calls made from the girls' phones, spanning days even after one phone had died. The final attempts came after the correct PIN was no longer used, hinting that only one girl may have remained alive or that a third party had gained access to the phone. We will dive deeper into the details of their phone's history next. Each detail chipped away at the idea of a simple accident, inviting speculation and sowing doubt. As the years passed, new theories emerged, each more polarizing than the last. Because in this case, the facts are real, but the truth might be slightly evident upon the discovery of their phones. And let us tell you, it only gets more bizarre. In the days following Chris Kimmer's and Lisanne Freund's disappearance, investigators clung to every fragment of information they could recover. What they found inside two phones, a white iPhone 4 and a black Samsung Galaxy S3, would become one of the most haunting aspects of the case. Both devices, retrieved from a backpack discovered over a week after the girls vanished, painted a picture of desperation, fear, and a chilling silence that slowly consumed them. The phone activity began on April 1st, the very day the girls were last seen. Lisanne's Samsung made the first emergency call to 112, the international emergency number. It lasted just a second due to no signal. A second attempt followed a minute later, again failing. Just moments after, at 4:51 p.m., Chris's iPhone also tried dialing 112. That call, too, failed. These frantic attempts to reach help suggested that something had gone terribly wrong just hours into what was supposed to be a casual hike on the El Pianista Trail. On April 2nd, Lisanne's phone tried again, first at 6:58 a.m. and again at 10:53 a.m., both to 112. Still no success. The calls didn't connect, but the effort alone told a grim story. The girls were alive, stranded, and desperately trying to call out for help. That same morning, Chris's iPhone attempted to call 911, Panama's emergency number, at 11:56 a.m., followed by more failed attempts throughout the day. On April 3rd, the calls continued in the morning, another to 911, then to 112, using both phones. But with each failed attempt, hope dwindled. What followed next was even more unsettling. After April 5th, the Samsung showed no further activity. Its battery had likely died. The iPhone, however, told a more cryptic story. On April 6th, it powered on again, but this time the correct PIN wasn't entered. From that day onward, someone repeatedly attempted to unlock the phone, never successfully. The calls had stopped. Now all that remained were silent, failed attempts to access the device, as if Chris herself had been separated from her phone, or worse, that someone else was trying to use it. Between April 7th and 11th, the iPhone was switched on multiple times, brief flickers of activity in the dark, but with no further calls, no photos, no messages, just a cold, lifeless glow each time the screen lit up. The final activity came on April 11th at 10:51 a.m. when the phone was turned on for the last time. After that, nothing. The timeline left behind by the phones is one of the most disturbing elements of the mystery. It's as if the devices were their last lifeline, slowly dimming along with their chances of survival. And while no call ever connected, the signals they left behind, a trail of unanswered cries, still echo through the jungle and through every unanswered question in this haunting case. But the story the phones told wasn't just about failed calls. It was about what didn't happen, about the silence that followed and the disturbing gaps that raise far more questions than answers. For instance, on April 11th, Chris's iPhone was turned on for exactly 64 minutes, a full hour. No call was placed, no message typed, no photo taken, just an hour of eerie silence with the screen on. Was someone scrolling through it, trying to figure out how to use it? Or did that glowing screen shine in the middle of the jungle, illuminating a final moment of helplessness? After that, nothing. The phone was never used again. No further attempts to power it on, no final messages, no last goodbyes. In a case that left behind hundreds of photos, attempted emergency calls, and desperate signals, the most baffling part might just be this. Why didn't they leave a message? No farewell, no explanation, no note typed into the phone's memo. Just silence. These unanswered questions continue to haunt everyone who has followed the case. Because in the end, the phones didn't just tell a story of what happened. They left behind the most bizarre and disturbing turn of events, enough to keep one awake all night. In the years since Chris and Lisanne's disappearance, the case has sparked a wave of intense, often polarizing theories, each attempting to shed light on the tragic mystery. With each new angle, a deeper layer of intrigue and tension unfolds as the truth remains locked somewhere in the shadows of the jungle. One of the most chilling theories to emerge is the foul play theory, suggesting that the two women were not just lost, but victims of something far darker, perhaps a kidnapping or even murder. The case is filled with suspicious details that seem to point to foul play. The bizarre images on their camera, some of which show unsettling, unexplainable scenes, and the fact that their remains were only found months after large-scale search efforts had turned up nothing. The timing of their deaths, so far removed from the last known search, raises the uncomfortable possibility that a third party may have been involved. Then there's the possibility of tampering. Could their belongings have been staged? Was the camera manipulated to create a false narrative? This theory lingers in the back of people's minds, unshakable and haunting. But as theories swirl, one stands out for its bizarre and controversial nature: the unrequited love theory. This theory is fueled by rumors circulating in dark corners of the internet, suggesting a deep hidden tension between the two women. According to this theory, Chris harbored unspoken love for Lisanne, a love that was never reciprocated. The story goes that a tense argument between the two led Chris to a moment of explosive anger, pushing Lisanne off a cliff in a fit of unrestrained emotion. Racked with guilt, the theory claims Chris wandered aimlessly through the jungle until her own death. However, this theory is riddled with holes. There's no concrete evidence to back up these claims, no signs of a violent confrontation or a hidden romantic relationship. Most dismiss it as a sensational rumor, but it still lingers, unsettling in its intensity. Then there's the organ trafficking theory, a more sinister and outlandish claim. According to this theory, the host family in Bouquet somehow got involved with organ traffickers, leading to the two women being abducted on the trail. The idea is that they were held captive for days, possibly subjected to a horrific fate before being killed. While the suggestion of organ trafficking stirs unease, the lack of any credible evidence to support this theory makes it seem highly unlikely. Investigators have pointed out the absence of proof, leaving the theory to fizzle in the background, a haunting whisper rather than a legitimate possibility. Despite these wild and chilling theories, a sizable group of experts remains steadfast in the accident theory, a much simpler but no less tragic explanation. According to this perspective, Chris and Lisanne simply went off the beaten path, becoming disoriented in the dense, unforgiving jungle. It's easy to imagine how quickly the environment could have turned against them. Rugged terrain, sudden injuries, and the crushing isolation of the jungle. One of them could have been hurt, forcing the other to venture out for help. This theory suggests that they ultimately succumbed to the dangers of exposure, starvation, and the unforgiving landscape, with no way to escape. While it's a hard theory to accept, it's one that, for many, fits the known facts best: an accident, tragic and unavoidable, in a place where survival is a constant battle against nature. Each theory has its own unique set of supporters, and with every new piece of evidence, the questions grow. But one thing remains clear. Chris and Lisanne's final hours are shrouded in mystery, leaving behind only fragments of truth and endless speculation. The mysterious case of Chris and Lisanne has refused to fade into the past. Over the last 5 years, the story has continued to captivate the public's imagination, drawing attention, theories, and intense scrutiny. In 2021, Dutch authors Maria West and Jurgen Snuren stirred the pot once again with the release of their book. Having spent countless hours combing through police files and records, they uncovered new perspectives and inconsistencies that had previously gone unnoticed. Their work seemed to breathe new life into the case, offering alternative theories that reignited public fascination. The unresolved questions they uncovered left many wondering if the official narrative had been wrong all along. In September 2023, the release of a film brought the global spotlight back to the case once again, reigniting curiosity about the two girls' final days. The film's re-examination of the case, highlighting alleged investigative oversights, offered a different perspective on how evidence had been handled. People began questioning, were critical pieces of information overlooked? Were the investigations flawed from the start? As the media spotlight once more focused on the tragic story, it stirred a new array of debate and speculation, causing many to wonder if there was more to this haunting mystery than anyone had realized. With each passing year, the case only grows more enigmatic, its disturbing questions continuing to haunt those who dare to dig deeper. New angles, fresh evidence, and renewed curiosity make it clear. This is a story that refuses to be forgotten. As the years have gone by, the families of Lisanne Froon and Chris Khmers have steadfastly stood by the official conclusion of their loved one's tragic accident. Their belief in this explanation has offered them a measure of closure. Even as the rest of the world remains captivated by the mystery, for them the story may have come to an end. But for everyone else, the puzzle lingers. The phone records, camera images, scattered remains, and lingering forensic uncertainties provide enough material to fuel a host of competing theories. While the families try to heal, investigators, journalists, podcast hosts, and online communities are still debating. Some see a tragic, albeit straightforward, misadventure in the treacherous landscape of El Pianista's rugged terrain. Others, however, sense the shadow of something far darker, a hidden truth that has yet to be uncovered. The case of Lisanne and Chris has evolved into one of Panama's most confusing and talked-about modern mysteries. Over the decades since their horrific hike, countless theories have surfaced, each more chilling than the last. Yet despite all the speculation, no definitive answer has emerged. As technology advances and new discoveries surface, there is always the possibility that one breakthrough, whether it's a fresh forensic analysis or a crucial new witness, could shed light on what truly happened during those final days. The questions remain unanswered, adding to the ever-growing sense of mystery that continues to surround the tragic deaths of Lisanne Froon and Chris Khmers. Was it simply a horrible accident? Or was there more lurking in the shadows? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've made it this far, be sure to check out this next video. It was early morning in Chapel Hill when two friends returned to their apartment, assuming Faith Hedgepath was simply sleeping in her car. The door was unlocked, and everything appeared normal until they stepped into her room. What they discovered stopped them in their tracks. A blanket covering something on the floor, blood splattered on the walls, and an eerie stillness that made it clear something terrible had occurred. There were no broken locks, no security cameras capturing who came or went, just a few strange late-night texts, some suspicious behavior, and a crime scene that would haunt the community forever. What really happened in that apartment, and why did it take so long for her killer to be caught? Faith Danielle Hedgepath was born on September 26, 1992, in Warren County, North Carolina. A proud member of the Haliwa-Saponi Native American tribe, she grew up in a close-knit family guided by her mother, Connie, and her older sister, Rolanda, after her parents divorced during her infancy. Despite the separation, Faith maintained a deep bond with her father, Roland, who once described her as the light that helped him overcome his darkest struggles with addiction. Her arrival, he said, gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Gifted and determined, Faith excelled academically, earning the prestigious Gates Millennium Scholarship and enrolling at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Initially pursuing a degree in biology, she faced challenges transitioning to university life, but refused to be discouraged. She changed her major, worked 2 jobs, and remained focused on her goal of becoming the first college graduate in her family. Her dream was to either become a pediatrician or a teacher, professions that mirrored her generous and compassionate spirit. Faith shared an off-campus apartment in Chapel Hill with her friend and former roommate from freshman year, Karina Rosie Rosario. They lived in Unit 1502 at Hawthorne at the View, a complex just minutes from campus. For a time, Karina's boyfriend Eric also stayed with them, but his presence soon became a source of tension. The relationship between Eric and Karina turned toxic, marked by volatility and breakups. Even after Karina changed the locks, Eric attempted to break into the apartment twice. With Faith's help, Karina obtained a protective order, but Eric moved into another unit in the same complex, remaining dangerously close. On September 6, 2012, Faith attended her classes and later participated in an event held by Alpha Pi Omega, the nation's oldest Native American sorority, which she hoped to join. By 7:15 p.m., she left the event to focus on a history paper about her tribe. At 8 p.m., she and Karina went to the campus library. Faith briefly left, returning at 11:30 p.m., and the two returned to their apartment around midnight. Shortly after, they decided to go out to The Thrill, a nightclub known for admitting people under 21. Security footage showed them entering The Thrill at 12:40 a.m. They danced for over an hour before Karina began to feel ill from drinking. They were recorded leaving at 2:07 a.m., with Faith driving them back home. Upon returning to their apartment, Karina reportedly became sick and went to bed around 3 a.m. A neighbor heard loud banging noises from above, describing them as heavy thuds, like furniture being toppled or a heavy backpack hitting the floor. Faith's Facebook account showed activity at approximately 3:30 a.m., followed 10 minutes later by a text message from her phone to Brandon Edwards, another of Karina's ex-boyfriends. The message read, "Hey B, can you come over here please? Rosario needs you more." "Uh-huh, you know, please let her know you care." Brandon responded the next afternoon at 4:16 p.m., asking who had messaged him, but by then it was too late. No reply ever came. At the same time the messages were being sent, Karina's phone also showed outgoing calls to Brandon. Faith's final known communication occurred at 3:52 a.m. when she messaged Ty Michael McNeil, her on-and-off boyfriend, saying, "I know you're probably sleeping, but I just wanted to let you know that I love you." At 4:25 a.m., Karina was picked up by a friend, Jordan McCraw, a soccer player at the university. She left the apartment door unlocked, believing Faith was asleep. The next morning, around 10:30 a.m., Karina attempted to contact Faith for a ride back. When she didn't answer, Karina reached out to a mutual friend, Marisol Rangel, who picked her up. They returned to the apartment just before 11 a.m. and assumed Faith had simply overslept. Upon entering, they called out her name, but there was no response. What they found in the bedroom was beyond comprehension. Faith's body was discovered partially undressed and covered with a blanket, positioned against the bed. Her shirt had been pulled up over her head, and there were signs of a vicious attack. Blood spattered across the walls, floors, and furniture. A used tampon was also found near her body, a detail that deeply disturbed investigators. There was no indication of forced entry, and frustratingly, no security cameras captured the movements in or out of the apartment that night. Karina was the one who placed the 911 call. The moment authorities stepped into the apartment, they were met with a scene so disturbing it left even seasoned officers shaken. The brutality of the crime was undeniable. Faith Hedgepath had been violently attacked, and the evidence of the assault was everywhere. She was pronounced dead at the scene. In the days and months following the murder of 19-year-old Faith Hedgepath, investigators uncovered disturbing details that painted a chilling picture but still left too many questions unanswered. One of the most significant discoveries was the presence of semen on Faith's body. DNA testing revealed it matched genetic material found elsewhere in the bedroom. While the physical evidence pointed to a possible sexual assault, the autopsy found no major trauma to the genital area. Still, Chapel Hill police leaned toward the belief that Faith had likely been raped, a conclusion her family firmly supports. A Bacardi rum bottle recovered from the crime scene became a key piece of evidence. It contained both tissue fragments and DNA, leading investigators to believe it may have been the murder weapon. Beside Faith's body lay a fast food bag from Time Out Chicken with a handwritten message scrawled across it. "I'm not stupid, expletive, jealous." Strangely, although the room was splattered with blood, the note remained clean. This suggested the killer had either written it after the attack, taking time to wash up, or had placed it carefully after attempting to conceal their identity. Handwriting expert Peggy Waller examined the note and concluded that it was written in a disguised style, indicating someone deliberately altered their handwriting to avoid being recognized. Faith's murder rocked the Chapel Hill community, a place that typically saw fewer than one homicide a year. According to Police Chief Chris Blue, her case quickly became one of the most extensive homicide investigations in North Carolina history. Still, for many months, updates were sparse. For Faith's family, the search for answers was agonizingly slow. Her mother, Connie, revealed that the family wasn't even allowed to view her daughter's body. It would take 2 years before they learned about the handwritten note left at the crime scene or had access to the autopsy report. All details surrounding her death were sealed by court order, which contradicted the usual policies of Chapel Hill police. In December 2012, the FBI joined the investigation, developing a psychological profile of the suspect. They theorized that Faith's killer likely knew her and may have lived nearby. They also believed the person may have taken an unusual interest in the case, possibly talking about it frequently or displaying strange behavior. By July 2014, after another court order, Chapel Hill police finally released 300 pages of case documents. The autopsy report followed in September, confirming what the family already knew. Faith had died from repeated blows to the head. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises, and blood was found under her fingernails. Signs she had fought hard for her life. Court documents showed that only 2 apartments were searched in the early days of the investigation, Faith's and one other unit in the same complex. Some sources claimed that the wooded area behind the apartment was never searched. Reports also indicate that no sniffer dogs were brought in, and officers didn't go door to door to question other residents, a surprising omission in such a high-profile case. Faith's phone offered another potential lead. On the night of her death, she called her friend Una Chavez 3 times. One of those calls left a voicemail, an accidental recording believed to have happened while the phone was in Faith's pocket. The message is difficult to understand, but those who knew her well believe it captured a tense moment. Some claimed they heard arguing or even a struggle. Others thought it just sounded like nightclub background noise. Faith's father, Roland, insists he can hear his daughter in distress. One journalist, Tom Gasparoli, became deeply invested in the case, launching a blog and podcast to help uncover the truth. He worked alongside forensic audio expert Arla West, who reviewed the voicemail in detail. West, a veteran in audio enhancement and forensic analysis, believed the recording captured 4 voices, 2 male and 2 female, and suggested a heated exchange. The timestamp showed the message was left at 1:23 a.m., shortly before Faith was seen leaving the club with her roommate. By 2:07 a.m. on September 7, 2012, Faith Hedgepath and her roommate were captured on surveillance footage, leaving the Thrill nightclub.
11:01 a.m. 44 seconds, September 7, 2012.
Durham 911, where is your emergency?
I just walked into my apartment and my friend is just she's unconscious.
Okay, what's your address, ma'am?
I live at Hawker at the View.
You say your friend is unconscious?
She's unconscious. I just walked in the apartment and there looks like there's blood everywhere.
Okay, listen to me. Okay, listen to me. Okay, how old is she?
She's 19.
Listen to me. Is she breathing?
I don't know.
You need to check and see. Is she breathing?
I don't think so.
Okay, listen to me.
There's blood everywhere. She's on her back, but I think she fell off the bed because she's off the bed. There's blood all over the pillows, in the comforter. I just don't know what happened.
Touch her arm. Tell me, how does she feel?
She's not moving.
Okay, ma'am, we need to find out if we can help her or not. Okay, kneel next to her and look in her mouth for food or vomit. Tell me something. Listen to me. What is your name?
Karina.
Listen to me. When you touched her, how does she feel?
She feels cold.
She feels cold? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Don't touch anything else. Okay? Okay. What room is she in?
She's in my bedroom.
Listen to
in my room that was not here before.
Okay,
it looks
listen
like
to
someone
me.
had came in here.
Okay.
It really does.
Okay. Tell me again what your name is.
It looks like someone had been in there because she's not for sale. I don't know what.
Okay. Now tell me again what your name is.
What?
What is your name?
Karina Rosario.
Karina? Okay, Karina. How old are you, Karina?
I'm 20.
You're 20? Okay, hon.
At that moment, everything seemed fine, at least on the surface. But as the timeline of that night continued to unravel, investigators and independent experts began to question just how accurate the digital trail really was. One of those experts was forensic audio analyst Arla West, who expressed doubts about the timestamp on the mysterious voicemail left from Faith's phone at 1:23 a.m., a time that seemingly conflicted with the nightclub footage. According to West, both Faith and her friend Una Chavez owned phones that were prone to timestamping issues. He also noted that the local cell towers were unreliable and suggested the message may have been recorded at a different time altogether. While Chapel Hill police agreed to review his enhanced version of the audio, they ultimately stood by the original metadata, stating they didn't believe the recording captured the moment of the murder. In 2015, Chapel Hill police expressed confidence that the DNA evidence would eventually lead them to an arrest, though they didn't publicly confirm what specific DNA was being referenced or where it was collected. They remained optimistic. Meanwhile, Faith's death created a deep sense of fear and grief on campus. Vigils were held in her memory, including a traditional Native American ceremony to honor her life and spirit. Many students mourned her loss, not just as a friend, but as a cultural sister whose joy and kindness had touched countless lives. In 2016, a major development reignited interest in the case. Using DNA collected from the crime scene, a Virginia-based lab generated a composite sketch of the potential suspect. The image was built using forensic phenotyping, predicting traits like eye color, skin tone, face shape, and even likely ancestry. Based on the results, the suspect was believed to be of Native American and European or Latino descent. While not definitive, the sketch gave investigators and the public a possible face behind the crime. Several people connected to Faith were scrutinized as part of the ongoing investigation, among them a man seen leaving the nightclub with Faith and Karina. He had arrived at the club earlier with 3 others. All 4 were questioned and provided DNA samples, but none matched the DNA from the scene. Much of the suspicion also fell on Karina's ex-boyfriend, Eric. He was known to have disliked Faith's influence over Karina and reportedly blamed her for the breakup. Police uncovered troubling messages sent by Eric in the hours before the murder. On September 6th, he sent a text to a friend asking for forgiveness for something he was about to do. A similarly worded message appeared on Twitter. Then, 3 days after Faith was killed, he posted a cryptic message on Facebook. "Dear Lord, forgive me for all of my sins and the sins I may commit today. Protect me from the girls who don't deserve me and the ones who wish me dead." Today, investigators seized Eric's vehicle and searched his home but found nothing of use. His DNA did not match the sample from the crime scene, and although he was cooperative, police still consider him a person of interest. They suspect he may have knowledge about who was responsible, even if he wasn't directly involved. Faith's father has remained outspoken, continuing to believe that Karina knows more than she's revealed. Others have also questioned her behavior following the discovery of Faith's body, especially the 911 call she made. The call, which lasted over 8 minutes, made no mention of Faith by name and didn't acknowledge that another friend was also present in the apartment. This created the impression that Karina was alone. Police have said that Karina's account left lingering questions and that there were inconsistencies in what she told investigators. One of the neighbors who bumped into Karina and Marisol just minutes after the body was found recalled that the girls didn't appear shaken. Adding to the confusion, Karina had reportedly left the nightclub early due to feeling unwell, only to leave the apartment again just hours later, leaving the front door unlocked. The person who picked her up was a soccer player at the university. The roommate of the soccer player claimed to have noticed a small red mark on Karina's clothing that day. Police were made aware of this and searched for the shirt in question. It was tested, but the results were inconclusive. Authorities could not say whether the stain was blood, nor did the test link Karina directly to the crime. Despite the lack of physical evidence tying her to the murder, Karina has remained a central figure in the case. Private investigator Hunter Glass, who has worked closely with Faith's family, believes that the truth may lie with her. He suspects a possible argument between Faith and Karina at the Thrill nightclub, possibly over a relationship, could have been the spark that led to Faith's death. Not long after the murder, Karina moved out of North Carolina and has not spoken publicly about the case. According to Faith's father, Roland, she stopped answering his calls. Still, police say Karina has always been cooperative when contacted. As the investigation expanded, other names began to surface. Karina revealed that Faith had been romantically involved with both her high school sweetheart Alex and Ty Michael McNeil. Around the same time, she described Ty as emotionally intense and said Faith had once confided that he pushed her into a wall during an argument. Another friend, Una Chavez, who received a mysterious voicemail from Faith's phone the night of the murder, echoed similar concerns. Una recalled Faith telling her that Ty had also struck her in the past. Ty was interviewed during a 2018 case review. He said that on the evening before Faith's death, he texted her asking if she wanted to spend time together, but received no reply until a message arrived from her phone at 3:52 a.m. The message read as affectionate, but both Roland and Una felt it didn't sound like Faith. She had just recently told Una she wanted to rekindle her relationship with Alex, making the late-night message to Ty seem out of character. Ty submitted a DNA sample and said he had an alibi, but wasn't sure if police had officially cleared him. For nearly a decade, the murder of Faith Hedgepath was surrounded by theories, suspicions, and unanswered questions. Friends, former partners, and close acquaintances had all come under scrutiny, and investigators chased countless leads with no arrest until everything shifted in 2021. On September 16, 2021, the Chapel Hill Police Department announced the arrest of 28-year-old Miguel Salguero Olivares of Durham, North Carolina. The breakthrough came not through interviews or tips, but through DNA collected after Salguero Olivares was arrested the month before on a DUI charge in nearby Wake County. His genetic profile was entered into the system and matched DNA recovered from the crime scene nearly 9 years earlier. Court documents later revealed that it wasn't just the DNA that connected him to the murder. A palm print found on the suspected murder weapon, a liquor bottle, also matched Salguero Olivares, making the evidence against him even stronger. Police had not publicly identified Salguero Olivares as a suspect before the match, and his name had never appeared in early reports. His sudden connection to the case stunned both the public and those who had long followed the investigation. Chief of Police Chris Blue asked the community for patience, stating, "This story will take time to completely unfold." Then in November 2024, the case took another serious turn. Prosecutors amended the original indictment, formally adding 3 new charges: first-degree burglary, first-degree rape, and first-degree sexual offense. The additional charges deepened the gravity of the accusations and brought new clarity to what may have happened that night in Faith's apartment. With the arrest came a mix of relief and renewed pain. After years of doubt, the case had finally produced a name, a person now legally accused of ending Faith's life. But as the legal process began, so did a new chapter in the search for answers. Who was Miguel Salguero Olivares? How did he come into contact with Faith? And what exactly happened in those final moments? For her family, it was a long-awaited step toward justice, but for a community still haunted by the loss, it marked just the beginning of uncovering the full truth. Don't miss out. Subscribe. On an October morning in Scarborough, a man called 911 claiming his pregnant wife was in the bathtub and not breathing. He said he found her like that after going for a jog. While he sounded upset, something felt off. Why hadn't he pulled her out of the water? Why was he so calm during the call? And why did his story keep changing? Initially, it seemed like a tragic accident, but as days passed, more questions arose, revealing that this situation was far from what it appeared. This is the story of a vibrant woman, a husband with dark secrets, and a truth that took years to surface. Philip Grandin was born in the late 1980s and raised in Ontario, Canada. From an early age, those close to him described him as charismatic, confident, and remarkably bright. He excelled academically, earning a scholarship for his achievements. In 2003, at just 17, Philip made local headlines as the first male contestant in the Miss Paris Fair competition, later renamed Ambassador of the Paris Fair, where he was named runner-up. The event encouraged youth leadership and community involvement, qualities Philip seemed to embody fully. The following year, he graduated as the top student in his school district. With a passion for faith, he pursued theological studies and became a pastor at Inner Day Road Evangelical Baptist Church by 2007. That's where he met Anna. Born on November 10, 1981 in the Philippines, Anna was the daughter of Maria and Roman Darbin and sister to Hannah. Her family immigrated to Toronto in 1994 in search of better opportunities. Known for her discipline and kindness, Anna worked part-time jobs while studying at the University of Toronto. In 2006, she graduated with honors in human biology and archaeology, beginning her career in risk assessment for a firm in downtown Toronto. Anna's friends and family described her as a radiant soul, gentle, spiritual, and full of life. Despite living with a chronic liver condition, she maintained a positive outlook, never allowing her health to overshadow her joy. Her deep faith kept her grounded, and she was active in several Baptist congregations. In 2008, her personal life began to flourish after crossing paths with Philip. Both shared a strong devotion to their faith, and soon after meeting, they began a relationship built on spiritual connection and mutual admiration. Their bond grew quickly, leading to a traditional Christian marriage. They settled into a modest bungalow in Scarborough, Ontario, and 3 years later, the couple received joyful news. Anna was pregnant. She was thrilled, lovingly referring to the baby as Jellybean, excited to embrace motherhood. However, their happiness was short-lived. In August 2011, Anna made a devastating discovery. Philip was having an affair. Worse still, the other woman was a friend of Anna's and a member of the very church where Philip preached. The betrayal cut deep. To add insult to injury, Anna also found out that her husband was regularly consuming adult content, a direct violation of the values he preached every Sunday. Despite the emotional turmoil, Anna remained calm and composed. Her love for Philip didn't falter. She expressed a willingness to forgive both him and the woman who had betrayed her trust. But forgiveness wasn't the end of the story. Anna wanted to save her marriage and help Philip find his way back to the principles he once lived by. She turned to someone they both trusted, Stephen, a longtime friend and fellow pastor. When Anna confided in him about the affair, Stephen offered to mediate weekly counseling sessions. Philip agreed, appearing remorseful and ready to make amends. However, as therapy progressed, deeper concerns emerged. Stephen suggested that Philip step down from his pastoral role, arguing that someone in moral conflict couldn't effectively guide others, especially while his former mistress was still in the congregation. Initially resistant, Philip eventually conceded and resigned from his position. During one of the sessions, it became clear that Philip's issues extended beyond the affair. His compulsive consumption of explicit material posed a serious problem. Stephen recommended installing filters on Philip's computer to block such sites and emphasized the importance of focusing on healing his marriage. Philip seemed to comply, finding new work as a nurse and manager at a retirement home. From the outside, it appeared he was on the path to redemption, but what happened next would shatter that illusion and take everyone by surprise. Despite attending therapy and stepping down from his pastoral role, Philip had not ended his affair. He had simply become better at hiding it. He and his lover, a trusted friend of Anna's, continued their secret encounters, often meeting in secluded spots and using his car as a rendezvous point. Anna wasn't naive. She sensed the lies. In early October 2011, during a couples therapy session, she confronted Philip once again about the affair. Just days later, on October 14th, the pregnant 29-year-old checked into a hospital, complaining of dizziness and overwhelming fatigue. While in the emergency room, she called her sister, Hannah, explaining that her symptoms began shortly after drinking a smoothie her husband had prepared. She even asked Philip if he had put something in the drink, but he denied it. Her instincts, however, were not wrong. Toxicology tests later revealed traces of lorazepam, a sedative that should never be given to pregnant women due to the risks it poses to both mother and unborn child. Anna remained under medical observation overnight and was released once her condition improved. No one could have known that this visit to the hospital would be her last. Just 3 days later, on October 17th, emergency services received a panicked call from Philip. He claimed to have returned from a jog to find his pregnant wife unconscious and submerged in the bathtub. During the call, the dispatcher provided step-by-step instructions. Drain the water, lift her out, and start CPR. But Philip, a trained nurse, claimed he didn't know how to perform CPR. He said he couldn't remove her from the tub because she was too slippery. The 911 operator urged him to use towels to drain the bathwater and to act quickly. Yet throughout the call, the sound of splashing water never stopped. He had done nothing. When first responders arrived at the house, they found Anna still submerged. She was rushed to the hospital, but neither she nor her unborn child could be saved. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death: drowning. Philip was brought in for questioning, and after over 2 hours with investigators, he was released. The next day, he met with Pastor Stephen to discuss funeral arrangements. When Stephen suggested buying a double burial plot so he could rest beside his wife and unborn child, Philip coldly declined, stating he might remarry one day and didn't think sharing a grave with Anna was appropriate. The comment was jarring and wildly out of place for a man who had just lost his wife and child. 2 weeks later, Anna's funeral was held at Jarvis Baptist Church, the very congregation she had served with devotion. Her family, friends, and the community gathered to honor her memory. But one guest stirred outrage: Philip's lover. She attended the ceremony despite being a central figure in the betrayal that shattered Anna's world. Philip stood silently by her side, adding insult to injury. He published an obituary in the Toronto Star, claiming Anna had been his beloved wife and best friend, and that they had eagerly awaited their baby's arrival. He ended the tribute by stating that the child had joined her in heaven. For many, this display of grief felt like nothing more than a performance. Those close to Anna saw through the mask. In the months that followed, Philip continued seeing his mistress in secret. It wasn't until early 2012 that the affair appeared to end. Meanwhile, the community's suspicion deepened and rumors swirled about Philip's conduct. Anger grew over the authorities' apparent lack of action. A pregnant woman, drugged and dead in her own bathtub, was gone, and yet her husband walked free. Behind closed doors, homicide detectives in Ontario had been gathering evidence, slowly building a case that pointed to deliberate, premeditated murder. Their conclusion was clear: Philip had drugged Anna with the intent to end her life. In May 2012, he was formally arrested and charged with first-degree murder. According to a spokesperson from the Homicide Division, no single piece of evidence sealed the case. It was the weight of many small, damning details. Yet despite the serious charges, a judge ruled that Philip would await trial under house arrest at his parents' secluded farm in Brant County. Their identities were kept from the public, but the news of his arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors who had known the Grandines expressed disbelief. One woman, Linda, recalled summers spent with the couple, sipping lemonade on her porch and celebrating birthdays together. She said Philip always seemed happy, albeit nervous about becoming a father. Nothing in her eyes hinted at darkness. But investigators were confident Philip had done more than break his vows. He had orchestrated the death of his pregnant wife. The road to justice was long and painstaking. It wasn't until 2014, 2 years after his arrest, that the murder trial began. Prosecutors alleged that Philip, a former pastor and practicing nurse, had sedated Anna with lorazepam, waited until she was completely vulnerable, then placed her in the bathtub and left her to drown. His motive? To break free from the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood and pursue a future with his mistress. During the trial, her identity was confirmed. She was the couple's former nanny and a member of Philip's church. Despite overwhelming suspicion, Philip pled not guilty, claiming Anna had either taken her own life or drowned by accident. However, the prosecution presented damning evidence. Anna's longtime family doctor, Dr. Irving Gora, testified that in nearly a decade of treatment, he had never prescribed her lorazepam. She had no history of needing such medication. In contrast, the doctor confirmed that just weeks before Anna's death, Philip had come to him complaining of depression and marital stress. During that appointment, he confessed doubts about whether Anna had ever been the right partner for him. Anna's obstetrician also took the stand, confirming he had not prescribed lorazepam either. Their testimonies reinforced the prosecution's narrative. The sedative found in Anna's system had not come from any licensed professional overseeing her care. Toxicology reports were pivotal. They showed that Anna had lorazepam in her system on the night she died, but also days earlier during her hospitalization for dizziness and confusion. At that time, the levels had been lower. By the time of her autopsy, the dosage in her body had significantly increased. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. Perhaps the most chilling revelation came from a forensic analysis of Philip's computer. Investigators uncovered a search made from his user account on October 10th, just 1 week before Anna's death. The query posted on Wiki Answers read, "Is 100 milligrams of lorazepam fatal?" According to prosecutors, the hospital visit on October 14th wasn't just a warning, it was a test run, a rehearsal for what would come next. 3 days later, Anna was dead. They also discovered that on the very morning of October 14th, while Anna lay in the hospital recovering from a drug-induced medical emergency, a user on Philip's computer had searched for escort services in Toronto at exactly 4:48 a.m., just before Anna was discharged. Someone using his account browsed websites for ultimate intimate experiences. Just hours after his wife returned home, that same user was online again, this time researching the sedative lorazepam to understand how Philip may have obtained the drug. Prosecutors brought in his former supervisor from the retirement center where Philip worked. Catherine Fiore testified that as associate head nurse, Philip was in charge of dispensing and disposing of medications for elderly residents. Investigators had uncovered a document on his computer from June 2011 listing residents and their prescriptions, among them lorazepam. But perhaps most damning of all, tech experts revealed that while Philip claimed he had been out jogging the day Anna died, his adult content filter had been disabled. The implication was clear. He had been home the entire time and had lied to police. Testimony from his former mistress further dismantled any remaining illusion of innocence. She told the court that she and Philip had spoken on the phone for 30 minutes the day he claimed to have found his wife unresponsive in the bathtub. Later that same day, after being released from police questioning, Philip went to her home and slept with her. Though she claimed Philip never spoke of violence, her account portrayed a man far removed from the grieving husband he presented in public. Still, she insisted they remained friends. Philip's defense argued that Anna had taken the drug herself, driven by depression after learning of the affair. They claimed there was no proof he administered it, but the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. In January 2015, after 2 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Philip Grandin was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. During sentencing, the judge handed down a 15-year prison term, stating that the level of Philip's deception and cruelty defied human decency. Anna's mother and sister gave a statement outside the courthouse, remembering her as a kind, faithful soul and expressing their grief. They thanked those who had supported them, but the sense of closure was short-lived. Philip appealed the ruling, and a higher court overturned his conviction, citing a technical error in how the jury had been instructed. A new trial was ordered, and this time he would face the lesser charge of involuntary manslaughter. He was released on bail once again. During the second trial, which began in early 2019, prosecutors maintained that Philip had drugged Anna to free himself for another life with his mistress and to continue feeding his obsession with explicit material. They argued that even if he didn't intentionally drown her, he had acted with gross negligence by allowing her to bathe while under the influence. The defense repeated its claim that Anna had taken the drug on her own and died in a tragic accident. This time, the jury convicted Philip of involuntary manslaughter. He remained free on bail until sentencing. During the impact statement, Anna's mother described how her world collapsed upon learning of her daughter's drowning. She called the attack not just a crime against her daughter and unborn grandson, but against God. Her father, who had flown in from the Philippines, shared that the trauma had nearly killed him too. On the journey to attend his daughter's funeral, he suffered 2 strokes from the emotional toll. In early 2020, Philip was sentenced once again to 15 years in prison. The judge declared that his actions were premeditated, calculated, and malicious, and that the drug had clearly been used to incapacitate his wife. But unbelievably, Philip appealed a 3rd time. While awaiting yet another trial, he was granted bail once again. His legal team argued that there was no proof he knew Anna had taken the sedative and no way to prove he foresaw her death. They also argued that the sentence was excessive. By this point, Anna's family was losing hope. The man who had promised to love and protect her had instead ended her life, and the justice system seemed unable to hold him accountable. In May 2022, more than a decade after Anna's death, the highest court in Ontario rejected all of Philip's appeals. The judges unanimously agreed that Philip, as a trained nurse, had both the general and specific knowledge of the risks Anna faced after ingesting lorazepam. They concluded he knew the drug's effects, having seen them before, and that his failure to intervene while she bathed was criminally negligent. Philip Grandin was finally ordered to begin serving his full 15-year sentence. After the ruling, Anna's sister, Hannah, spoke to reporters, expressing relief that he was now in custody for a crime he had been convicted of twice. She emphasized that justice for victims of domestic abuse must be real and meaningful, and that while Philip had delayed accountability with appeals and legal games, Anna never got the chance to appeal her fate. She was sentenced to death the night her husband chose betrayal over love. Since that tragic day in October 2011, Anna's family has lived through a nightmare. They left their home in the Philippines hoping for a better future in Canada. But in Philip Grandin, they encountered a man whose public image of virtue masked a darkness few could have imagined. Anna Grandin was gentle, kind, full of faith and light, and her life was stolen by the very person she trusted most. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was an early morning on May 17, 2005, when a frantic 911 call came from a quiet home in Alexandria, Kentucky. A woman was screaming, claiming that someone had broken in and shot her husband. When the police arrived, they found a house in complete disarray. Drawers were open, items were scattered everywhere, and glass from a broken door littered the floor. In the bedroom, they discovered a man's body. Initially, it appeared to be a robbery gone wrong, but something felt off. The story didn't add up. The children remembered events differently, and then police uncovered something hidden deep inside the washing machine that changed everything. What truly happened in the Bosley home that morning, and why would someone want Bob Bosley dead? The answer shocked everyone. Robert Bob Bosley was born on August 2, 1962, in the serene town of Alexandria, nestled in Campbell County, Kentucky. Raised in a religious, close-knit family alongside his siblings, Deborah, Henry Jr., and James, Bob exhibited signs of a sharp mind and ambitious spirit from an early age. Although much of his early life remains undocumented, it is known that even before reaching adulthood, Bob began charting his own course. He envisioned becoming wealthy and running his own business. Starting from the ground up, Bob offered chimney cleaning and small-scale roof repairs. With long days, modest pricing, and an impeccable work ethic, he slowly built a reputation as a dependable and friendly worker. Over time, Bob transformed his one-man service into a thriving enterprise, Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep of Alexandria. Under his watchful eye, the company became known for quality, efficiency, and reliability, earning both loyal clients and impressive profits. With money pouring in, Bob set his sights even higher, acquiring rental properties and eventually owning around 20. These investments amplified his income, positioning him as one of the area's most successful businessmen. His newfound wealth translated into a luxurious lifestyle, complete with sports cars, horses, an airplane, a sizable boat, and an arsenal of expensive firearms. His boat, often seen cruising Lake Cumberland, became infamous for its wild adult parties filled with alcohol, music, and scantily clad guests. It was at one of his favorite local restaurants that Bob met 18-year-old Amy Pave. Also from Alexandria, Amy came from humble beginnings, born in 1969 into a working-class family. Her life was shaped by financial limitations and a household affected by her father's struggle with alcohol. Determined to break the cycle, Amy graduated high school with top honors in 1986 and pursued business studies at a local community college connected to Northern Kentucky University. To fund her education, she worked as a waitress where she crossed paths with Bob. He was older, wealthy, and charismatic. Initially reserved, Amy soon found herself drawn into his world, attending his notorious lake parties and gradually becoming a regular fixture in his inner circle. Their relationship grew serious, and after 4 years together, they married. For Amy, it was the ultimate transformation. She had gone from modest roots to marrying one of the most sought-after bachelors in the region. The couple soon started a family, welcoming their daughter Morgan in 1996, followed by a son, Trevor, 3 years later. Amy, once the carefree partygoer, shifted into the role of devoted mother, replacing wild nights on the lake with school functions and parenting. Bob continued to expand his business and investments, but one area frustrated him: administration. Managing payroll, taxes, invoices, and contractors was a burden he resented. He preferred the freedom of the lake over the confines of an office, often vanishing aboard his boat for days without disclosing his whereabouts. Friends later recalled that Bob began drifting away from his family, drawn back into a life of indulgence and secrecy. Some sources even claimed that he and Amy had an open relationship. Regardless of the truth, Bob eventually decided to merge his personal and professional life more closely. Since Amy had studied business administration, he asked her to take over the company's financial and administrative responsibilities. Initially hesitant, Amy eventually agreed. From then on, she managed the company's books, payroll, and tax obligations. The business was booming, and the Bosleys appeared to be thriving. They lived in a rustic log cabin nestled in the woods south of Alexandria, a temporary residence, while their dream home, a sprawling estate with 14 acres of land, stained glass windows, a stone tower, and even Gothic gargoyles, was being built nearby. To the outside world, the Bosleys embodied the American dream. They were attractive, successful, generous with their time, and deeply involved in their church and children's school activities. Bob often donated services to low-income families, and his name was respected throughout the community. However, like many fairy tales, their story had a dark side. Behind the scenes, Amy's role as administrator gave her access to the full financial picture. With Bob distracted by business expansion, the lake, and the Dream House project, Amy quietly began diverting company funds. Instead of paying the company's taxes, she rerouted the money into an undisclosed personal account. This embezzlement went unnoticed for years, but no one avoids the IRS forever. The Internal Revenue Service had been tracking the company's missing tax payments, issuing repeated letters, making calls, and even attempting to set up meetings. However, Bob never received any of these warnings because Amy had arranged for all IRS correspondence to be delivered to a private mailbox only she could access. She was well aware that the government was closing in, but perhaps she believed she could keep stalling indefinitely. Everything changed on the morning of Tuesday, May 17, 2005, just days before the couple's 15th wedding anniversary. Around 5 a.m., a frantic 911 call came in from Amy Bosley. Her panicked voice filled the line, but the call was suddenly cut off by a loud crashing sound. Dispatchers tried to reconnect, and moments later, law enforcement was racing to the Bosley cabin. When officers arrived, they found Amy in shock, clutching her children. Her sister soon arrived to take the kids while Amy was brought in for questioning. Police secured the scene and called in the crime scene unit. At first light, additional officers arrived to search the surrounding forest with K-9 units and even a helicopter, searching for what they believed was a fleeing intruder. Inside the bedroom, they discovered Bob's lifeless body. He was found kneeling by the side of the bed, slumped forward and riddled with gunshot wounds. Yet oddly, only 2 shell casings were found in the room, raising more questions than answers. Instead of bringing clarity, the investigation only deepened the mystery. As detectives continued combing through the evidence, they began to suspect that the crime scene, and perhaps the entire story, wasn't what it seemed. Aside from the children's bedrooms, the entire house was in disarray. Kitchen cabinets stood wide open, including those beneath the sink, a strange place for a thief to search. A rear door had a broken window, suggesting a possible point of entry, but curiously, most of the shattered glass was found outside, not inside, an inconsistency that raised eyebrows from the start. The signs of disorder continued throughout the house. In the bathroom, the mirrored cabinet was open and prescription bottles were scattered across the floor. It looked more like staged chaos than the aftermath of a focused intruder. Based on Amy's 911 call, the alleged assailant had fled quickly, so why the mess? While crime scene investigators worked through the house, detectives began questioning Amy Bosley at the station. She appeared shaken and distraught at times, but often confused, as if struggling to keep her story straight. She described the intruder as a white male with a nasal voice, bad breath, and a distinct odor of urine. According to Amy, he had burst in during the night and attacked both her and Bob. She displayed 2 marks on her chest, claiming they were from the assault. When asked who might have wanted to harm Bob, Amy floated the idea that he wasn't well liked, suggesting he had a wild reputation and might have made enemies among disgruntled employees. She specifically named Noah Heim, a contractor and longtime friend of Bob, as someone who had recently argued with him. However, Noah was quickly ruled out. He had a solid alibi and was deeply affected by Bob's death. Meanwhile, panic rippled through the Alexandria community. Schools were closed for several days as fear of a killer on the loose took hold. Neighbors couldn't reconcile the idea that someone as kind and generous as Bob, known to give the shirt off his back, had been brutally gunned down in his own home. Back at the cabin, detectives searched for answers. Only 2 shell casings were recovered near Bob's body, despite multiple gunshot wounds. This led investigators to expand their search to the basement. There, inside the family's washing machine, they found soaked clothing, and at the bottom, a folded cloth containing 4 additional shell casings. Why would a fleeing killer take the time to hide evidence in a washer inside the victim's home? It didn't make sense. Even stranger, an aluminum baseball bat was found nearby with fresh scratches and white residue. Lab analysis would be needed to determine its significance. For now, Amy was released and allowed to reunite with her children, but the puzzle pieces were falling into place. The crime scene appeared staged. Valuables, including stacks of cash, were left untouched. Amy's emotional display seemed hollow. No tears, no real grief. Investigators suspected there was more beneath the surface. Then came the breakthrough. Staff from the IRS visited the station after hearing about Bob's death. They had been trying for months to contact him regarding a massive unpaid tax bill of over $1.7 million. A meeting had been scheduled for the very day Bob was found dead. The IRS agents also revealed something bizarre. During a previous call, they had spoken to someone who claimed to be Bob, but the voice was strange, high-pitched, and clearly unnatural. To them, it sounded like a woman pretending to be a man. That voice had been Amy's. Now the motive was clear. Amy, entrusted with the company's finances, had siphoned off hundreds of thousands of dollars, diverting tax payments into her own private account. Bob, who had no idea what was happening, was about to discover the truth, just as the IRS prepared to confront him face to face. Adding to the tension were Bob's alleged affairs. His sister later told investigators she once overheard Amy say that if Bob ever cheated or left her, she would shoot him. At the time, it sounded like a joke. Now it sounded like a promise. Despite mounting evidence, Amy Bosley continued to deny any involvement in her husband's murder. During her second interrogation, she insisted she loved Bob, even if their marriage wasn't perfect. She admitted they had their problems. What couple didn't? But claimed there was no reason she would ever harm the father of her children. However, investigators saw a different picture. Ballistics testing confirmed that all 6 bullets that struck Bob matched the 6 casings collected, 2 in the bedroom and 4 hidden in the washing machine. Then came a pivotal moment in the investigation. Interviews with Morgan and Trevor Bosley, ages 9 and 6. Questioned separately, both children gave identical accounts. They had gone to sleep peacefully, only to be startled awake by 6 gunshots, followed by the sound of glass shattering. Amy's version of events had the order reversed. First the glass breaking, then the shots. Her story was unraveling. Even the scratches on her chest, presented as injuries from a struggle with the intruder, were suspicious. The marks were too symmetrical, more like staged wounds than defensive injuries. Further examination of her blouse revealed that it hadn't been torn during the alleged attack. It had been carefully cut with scissors and then ripped to appear damaged. Less than 2 weeks after Bob's murder, authorities arrested Amy Bosley and formally charged her with his homicide. One crucial piece was still missing: the murder weapon. That too eventually surfaced, though how it was discovered remains disputed. According to one account, a pistol from Bob's own gun collection was found hidden in Amy's handbag, tucked behind a wardrobe. A second version claims the weapon was discovered later by Amy's sister, who had taken custody of her children and belongings that night. While sorting through Amy's purse, she allegedly found the gun and immediately contacted a lawyer, who turned it over to police. Regardless of how it was recovered, ballistic testing confirmed the gun matched the 6 casings found at the crime scene and in the laundry. The bullets inside Bob's body were too damaged to confirm a direct match, but the circumstantial case was overwhelming. As the trial began, prosecutors painted a clear and damning narrative. For years, Amy had secretly bled Bob's company dry, diverting tax payments and pocketing the money. She kept the IRS at bay through mail redirection and deception, but her luck had run out. On the morning of May 17, 2005, Bob was scheduled to meet with IRS agents who were demanding answers. Amy knew what that meeting meant: exposure, divorce, prison. So the once respected wife, mother, and community volunteer devised a desperate plan. The night before the IRS meeting, with her children sleeping nearby and her husband unaware, Amy quietly retrieved one of Bob's firearms. Some reports even suggest she sedated the children beforehand. Standing at his bedside while he slept, she fired. Bob, wounded but not immediately killed, awoke and tried to stop her. According to investigators, the trajectory of his injuries indicated that he lunged toward the attacker, only to realize too late that the gun was in Amy's hands. Stunned, bleeding, and betrayed, Bob couldn't overpower her. She fired again. By the time it was over, the man who had built a fortune from scratch and trusted Amy with everything lay dead in the home they were building for their future. The woman who once stood by his side now stood accused of orchestrating his execution, not out of fear, but out of greed. Amy Bosley's carefully constructed life of luxury and respect had collapsed in a single night of cold calculation. What remained was a shattered family, a stunned community, and a legacy of betrayal that would never be forgotten. She shattered the rear glass door with a baseball bat, tore through cabinets and drawers to simulate a burglary, then hid 4 spent casings wrapped in a cloth at the bottom of the washing machine to make her wounds appear credible. Amy lightly cut her chest with what was likely scissors, then slashed her blouse to simulate a struggle. She ended her performance with a desperate 911 call, her voice frantic. The scene staged, forensic evidence told a different story. Lab analysis confirmed that glass fragments on the aluminum bat matched the broken rear door. The bat, identified by her children as belonging to the family, had not been wielded by an intruder but used as a prop by Amy herself. Police found no footprints, no vehicle tracks, and no sign of anyone matching the description Amy gave. No outsider had come or gone that night. Meanwhile, investigators uncovered the truth about the Bosleys' marriage. Amy was convinced Bob had been unfaithful. Photos retrieved from the couple's safe, taken during wild parties on Lake Cumberland, revealed a second life and confirmed at least one extramarital affair. But while betrayal may have burned, the motive went far deeper. Amy's secret was unraveling. She had embezzled nearly $2 million from her husband's company by failing to pay taxes and diverting the money elsewhere. The IRS had scheduled a meeting with Bob for the morning after his murder, one that would have exposed everything. Killing him, Amy believed, would bury the secret. With Bob gone, his assets would cover the debt, and she could walk away with the rest. However, the children's testimony, hearing the gunshots before the glass shattered, destroyed her timeline. Though the defense claimed the bullet casings could have been dropped from Bob's own pockets after visiting the shooting range, the evidence piled up. Still, Amy's attorney argued there were no witnesses, no DNA, and no definitive link between the casings and the bullets in Bob's body. With enough ambiguity, they might sway the jury. Fearing Amy might walk free and unwilling to force the Bosley children to testify against their mother, prosecutors offered a plea deal. Amy would avoid a trial, spare her children the trauma, and receive a reduced sentence in exchange for admitting guilt without ever revealing what she had done with the stolen millions. On November 2, 2006, Amy Bosley entered a Campbell County courtroom in a green and white prison jumpsuit. Her demeanor was unreadable. Before sentencing, Bob's family addressed her directly. His brother James called her a liar and a fraud, warning that while she might one day enjoy freedom, she would never escape the memories. He reminded her that every night she would see Bob's face and the tears of the children she orphaned. Deborah, Bob's sister, stared at Amy as she asked the one question that haunted them all. Did he beg you to stop? No one would ever know. Then came Bob's mother, Audrey, heartbroken and trembling, reading a letter filled with grief over a final goodbye that never came. Amy sat silent, eyes on the floor, wiping away tears. The judge, bound by the plea agreement, condemned the damage Amy had done, not only to her husband, but to her children, her community, and her own future. He sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Under Kentucky law, she became eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence, meaning 17 years behind bars. On May 17, 2022, exactly 17 years after Bob's murder, Amy Bosley, then 54 years old, walked out of the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. Most news outlets barely noted her release, and her current whereabouts remain unknown. Some believe she may have gone in search of the millions she once siphoned away. As for Bob, his final resting place is St. Stephen's Cemetery in Campbell County, Kentucky, a man remembered for his generosity, ambition, and devotion to family, cut down by the very person he trusted most. In hindsight, Amy's actions seem both tragic and senseless. She wasn't destitute. Her husband wasn't cruel. The IRS might have worked out a settlement, and if her motive was revenge, a divorce might have left her richer and free. But instead, she chose murder. As the old American proverb, made famous by Benjamin Franklin, goes, "Nothing is certain except death and taxes." In Amy Bosley's case, both came knocking. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.